Hi, and welcome to section 4.4 for Econ 1 on the AQA exam board. Today we're going to be looking at what the sources of monopoly are and how we measure competition. We'll be measuring competition through concentration ratios and the HH index. So, first let's have a look at the sources of monopolies. One reason why a monopoly could occur is because of barriers to entry. This can arise for many different reasons. One reason could be because of economies of large-scale production, whereby a firm has to be a certain size in order to be able to compete with other firms. Another barrier of entry for other firms comes through the pricing structure of the monopoly. The monopoly may set a price which is a predatory price, which means that all other firms make a loss at that price and only the monopoly can make a profit at this price. If other firms are going to make a loss, then they will not enter the market and the monopoly will stay as a monopoly. Another barrier to entry is high sunk costs. These are costs that the firm would need to pay and they would get nothing back in return if they left the market. An example would be advertising and promoting a new business. If the business was to leave the market, then there would be no way that they could sell this advertising on to anyone else. This advertising cost would be lost. Another barrier to entry is brand loyalty. Another example of a barrier to entry is vertical integration. This is where the monopoly would own different parts of the production process. For example, they may own the resources that are needed to produce the goods, then the factories that produce the goods, and then they may have shops that then sell the goods to consumers. Another source of monopoly is barriers to exit. These are similar to barriers to entry, and an example of one is high sunk costs, which are costs that cannot be recovered if a firm wants to leave an industry. A monopoly can also arise due to a government granting one firm a monopoly status. This was the case for Royal Mail pre-2006. In 2006, it was opened up to competition from other mail providers. Patents or copyrights on ideas, images, or brands can also allow a firm to become a monopoly. Patents and copyrights give the owners exclusive rights to sell that product or service. The creator of the material has a monopoly over it. A monopoly may also come about because a firm may have exclusive access over a scarce resource. Another way a monopoly could come about is because of mergers and acquisitions. These mergers and acquisitions can reduce the competition in a market. Regulators usually step in to review whether the acquisition and mergers are in the interest of society. If they believe that society would benefit, the merger or acquisition will be passed. If they believe that the merger would result in a company becoming too powerful, then regulators will block a takeover and prevent the takeover from going through. Now let's look at how we can measure competition. One way we can measure competition is to use concentration ratios. We can get an indication of how competitive a market is by looking at the concentration ratio, which shows us what percentage of the market the top N firms have. N is usually 3 or 5. So here we have the market share for supermarkets. We have Tesco leading with 28.5%, then as the second with 16.5%, Sainsbury's, and so on. The three firm concentration ratio looks at the market share for the top 3 firms in the market. So we add Tesco, Asda, and Sainsbury's market share, which gives us a 3 firm concentration ratio of 61.4%. The 5 firm concentration ratio is worked out in a similar way. Rather than adding the top 3 firms, we now add the top 5 firms. So we go from Tesco down to the Co-op, which gives us a 5 firm concentration ratio of 78.6%. Another way that we can look at the level of competition in an industry is to use the HH index. It is calculated by squaring all of the market shares of firms in that industry. The larger the market shares, the greater the HH index score will be. The greatest value for the HH index is 10,000, which is a monopoly with a market share of 100%. We get this score from doing 100 squared, which gives you 10,000. The HH index score for 1,000 firms that each have 0.01% of the market is 1. We get this value by squaring 0.01 and multiplying it by 1,000, which is the number of firms.